Hello, everybody. Welcome to Summing Up, our podcast at Lawrence Simons. And I'm delighted to welcome today Stephanie Boyce, who is the 177th person to be the president of the Law Society of England and Wales. And Stephanie made history as the first Black office holder and indeed the first person of colour to hold this position. Stephanie holds a Master of Laws in Public Law and Global Governance from King's College London and is also the sixth female in role and was only the second in-house solicitor in almost 50 years to become president of the Law Society. Stephanie's background is a wonder to behold. She has extensive experience in corporate governance, commercial, civil, public and regulatory law. And Stephanie has advised some of the largest not-for-profit bodies, charities, regulators, local and central government in both a paid and unpaid capacity. Stephanie is also a member of Her Majesty's Treasury and Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, a commissioned independent task force to boost socio-economic diversity at senior levels in the UK financial and professional services. And also, finally, Stephanie is a member of the board of Thomson Reuters Transforming Women's Leadership in Law Advisory Board and is a commissioner of the National Preparedness Commission. Stephanie, it is my absolute honour to welcome you with us today. Thank you for agreeing to do this. It's really wonderful to have this opportunity to speak with you. And what I would like to do really is start right at the beginning and maybe ask you a few questions about your childhood, where it all began. Can you share with us what your earliest memories are?
Well, firstly, can I say, Claire, thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this programme. So my earliest memories is around probably the age of 7, when I first recall wanting to become a lawyer. And for me, that was because I grew up surrounded by some of the sounds of injustices that was going on around the world and indeed domestically. I could see people fighting for their rights, fighting to have their rights recognised, to exercise those rights, whether that was through voting or whether that was through their human rights. And I was absolutely fascinated by that. And I would go on to be fascinated by the story of Nelson Mandela. And so that's my earliest memory, around the age of 7, wanting to become a lawyer, fascinated, as I say, by characters like Nelson Mandela and indeed Margaret Thatcher, who at that time growing up was a female education minister, a barrister, and she became our first female prime minister.
And did you understand at 7 what a lawyer was then? I mean, did you have people around you who were lawyers? How did you understand that was a route that you could go down?
I didn't terribly understand what a lawyer did or the route to get there, because I come from a background where I did not have access to those networks. I didn't know a lawyer other than what I saw on television, other than what I saw and heard through the news. I did not know anybody close to me that was a lawyer. But what I did know was that a lawyer, solicitor, barrister was somebody who helped people exercise their rights, to recognise and advise those individuals how they could, as I say, exercise their rights. Because after all, for me, what is the point of legal rights? They mean absolutely nothing if you don't know when those rights are being taken away, or indeed you don't even know when those rights are being taken away, and you don't know how to exercise them.
Yeah. So from 7 to through that education, how did that look? What was the route that you got to become a lawyer, Stephanie?
Well, for me, it was very later on in life. I knew there was a steadfast belief inside of me to be a lawyer. I didn't readily know how I would get there, what I had to do to navigate. In fact, I was told, because of my low socioeconomic position, coming from a single parent household, growing up on a council estate, I was told that because of that background, that I would not make it. And indeed in my teenage life, that I should consider something else. But at the age of, or just before the age of 12, my mother remarried, and she remarried my stepfather, who was in the American Air Force at that time. And when his posting in the United Kingdom came to an end, we emigrated to the United States. And I think it's fair to say that the United States of America would have a lasting impression upon me. I'd be absolutely overwhelmed by the poverty that I would see, by people's inability to access justice because of their low socioeconomic position, because of the colour of their skin. And that absolutely propelled me through high school, as I did spend 6 years there and complete in high school, absolutely propelled me to wanting to give the voiceless a voice. And so, a day or so after finishing high school in America, I came back to the United Kingdom to begin my legal career. And it was, as I say, I stumbled across a number of barriers coming back here, i.e., my US qualification high school diploma wasn't recognised. But it was my second year at university before I started to realise and understand what I needed to do to have a training contract. And it was only through speaking to people, i.e., to go to university, to apply for a loan, to go on to law school. It was almost like a period of discovery, discovering what the next step in this map, this roadmap would be. Because, as I say, I did not have access to those networks, those vitally important networks where we draw our
Yeah.
information from.
I think that goes to the point about mentorship and sponsorship and the things that we talk about at Lawrence Simons, and I know that you're equally passionate about, Stephanie. Was there anybody that you were able to go and ask those questions or did you have any of that support? You said that you didn't have those networks, but was there anybody at all that was helping you through this process?
No, it was all driven by, either what I saw, read, or heard. And just to put that into context, whilst I'm not that old, the internet that we know today was not as prolific, certainly not for me, back in the early 90s. Because again, you needed money for the hardware, you needed money for the infrastructure. And that was something that I did not have that social capital for. I didn't have the resources to be able to fund internet in my own home. That came later. So the ability to be able to Google, where do I get a loan from? But it was through, as I say, when I started second year at university, I came across a charitable organisation who would start to open up some of those doors for me in terms of, have you thought about this? Have you done this? And that's when I started applying. And that's when I started, setting down that roadmap. But that's why I'm absolutely passionate that law should be taught in schools from the earliest age possible, because it goes back to the point about legal rights, but it also goes back to the point about social mobility, having access from an earlier age to those all important networks, that we can ask those questions and be informed as to what we need to do in order to have a successful career in law.
I don't I don't really have the words to share how extraordinary that is, because we at Lawrence Simons, obviously, we search talent, lawyers, and compliance professionals for people across the globe, and it is there's always usually somebody, right? I had a teacher, I had I had a neighbor, I had a friend or a parent, that so to do that without that, and as you pointed out, without access to information as readily as now on the internet, I mean, I am in admiration, Stephanie. I am in admiration. And do you think that process has become easier for people wanting to become lawyers today?
I would like to think so. So, whilst the barriers that I may have faced are different today, we know that there are still structural barriers, inequalities that exist. We know, for instance, if we look at the makeup of the solicitor profession, some 23% of us have been privately educated, as opposed to 7% of the wider UK population. So, and what we do know is if you don't come from a background where you readily have access to those individuals who you can ask those types of questions, or you don't have the resources, whether that's societal, whether that's financial, you are at a possible disadvantage to some of your colleagues who have had that, that all important social capital. They have that head start. So the barriers might be different, but they very much still exist.
You mentioned earlier about a charity that you had in your second year of university. What's the name of that charity? Is it still around?
I believe it's still around. The Windsor Fellowship, that was the charitable organisation that took ethnic minority students who they foresaw perhaps had a talent. And I came across them, as I say, second year at university. And it was through them that I gained work experience, a scholarship to work at the then Lord Chancellor's Department. And so that started to give me a taste of, what life in the law and indeed in politics would look like.
So if we sort of move into your career, Stephanie, and you're now going down that legal route, is there any advice that you would give to your younger self or any young lawyers starting out?
Absolutely. I mean, I've got plenty of advice to give. I mean, where do I start? Um, the advice that I would give is never, ever give up. Don't you dare give up. Our cemeteries are riddled with people whose dreams died with them. I say it is imperative that you owe it to yourself, you owe it to society to put the best version of yourself forward. And through not giving up, if I look, Claire, at how many attempts it took me to become president of the Law Society of England and Wales, it took me 4 attempts. 4 attempts. And I would have kept going a fifth, a sixth, a seventh, an eighth time if I had to, because such was the burning desire in me to become deputy vice president, as you then became, and then an automatic trajectory to become president. And it's been a fascinating journey, but the steadfast belief inside of me that every door is open if you push, you persevere until something happens. So you don't give up, you keep going, you're stronger than you know, stronger than you think, and eventually it will come to you.
That's very, very sage advice, if I may say so. I know that you and I both share a passion around diversity, equity, and inclusion. As a female CEO, when I look back at my early legal career, I think there were things that perhaps in the 90s you wouldn't see today, thankfully. Uh, However, one of the things that is always challenging is when you're dealing with hiring managers, when you're looking at how you hiring that talent, what do you do? Do you have any advice to hiring managers about how they can look at a broader spectrum of potential candidates?
What we know is that diversity adds, it adds a richness to our business. Diverse organizations are more profitable. It not only is a moral imperative, it's a business imperative that we have diversity in our businesses. But what I say is, it's not just enough to have a diverse voice in the room at the table. You must ensure that that voice is heard, it's listened to. And diversity is found everywhere. We're found in different universities other than the traditional universities. We're found in different sectors, different parts of the country through, diversity is a rainbow of different colors and different experiences. And, if we're not looking in all of those places, we are not we're not giving diversity an opportunity to play its role in our businesses, but not enough just to be diverse. Borrowing the words of Vina Myers, where she talked about diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. One cannot have diversity without inclusion. We must, as we build a more diverse organization, body, society, we must have inclusion also. And sometimes inclusion is forgotten.
I agree. Is there something then in terms of that inclusivity? Um, around how, so, we're two women speaking to each other, how, for example, job ads are written, or how promotions are, looked at. One company that we work with has an automatic opt-in in terms of promotions. So you actually have to opt yourself out if you're not wanting to be on that promotion track, which has seen actually their diversity and inclusion equity statistics increase, because typically women aren't perhaps as and I'm making some generalizations, and perhaps doesn't apply to the two women on this podcast, but sometimes women don't put themselves forward if they don't match all 10 criteria on a job description. So my question really is around, what can be done to ensure that people are being asked to dance? They're at the party. How do we ask them to dance?
Well, lots of people say that, change has to be driven from the top through the organisation. They set the tone at the top. Absolutely. But also, change is driven from the bottom up as well. We have to look at the language that we use in terms of our adverts, in terms of, when we're recruiting, in our job adverts, in our advertisements. We have to look at the vehicles that we are using in order to advertise. Are we advertising in diverse publications? Are we being inclusive in our language, in what we're seeking as criteria, central criteria, desirable criteria? So going back to the example you give, I probably would be controversial and say, why does one have to opt out? Because, having those types of conversations with plenty of individuals, there are lots of people who I know would opt out because they would say, well, it's never going to happen for me. So, what's the point? So why are people given the option to opt out? Everybody should be
Right.
on that fast track to promotion. But looking at how we've developed, looking at how we're all individually different, we absorb and process information differently, and there has to be recognition that we're not all the same. And we, as businesses, as organizations, we have to ensure that we are being inclusive, as I say, in our language, where we're recruiting. And whilst change is driven from the top, one of the things that we at the Law Society have done when we have held roundtables around diversity, inclusion, social mobility, and so forth, is looking also at HR colleagues and those responsible in the organisation for diversity and inclusion, and inviting them to the table, because they are the gatekeepers for the most part when we are looking to recruit. They are the ones who perhaps do the sifting, and will place the adverts and do the wording for those adverts. So we've got to ensure that our purpose, our objectives, our mission, our vision is extolled through the organisation, externally, internally, and we know what those objectives are, and that we are truly being diverse and inclusive.
You mentioned earlier, Stephanie, about your passion to become the president of the Law Society, and that it took you several attempts, but you didn't give up. Why did you want to be the president of the Law Society?
I Firstly, long before I became deputy vice president, I told myself I was deputy vice president. Such was the belief and the determination for me to get to where I am today. But equally, I joined council in 2013, and by 2015, I had put myself forward for the first time, because there was parts of me that didn't see or hear people that sounded or looked like me. And I'm not necessarily talking about my colour. I'm talking about the fact that I'm the second in-house solicitor in almost 50 years to become president. We know that the in-house community is the fastest growing area of our membership, some 25% when we took stock last. But also, the world is evolving, the world was evolving, and I felt that I had a contribution different than those who had gone before. And I wanted to make a contribution to the dialogue that was going on.
So 2013, 2015, then you're on the. So why that length of time, or why that continuation of I'll get there. What? First of all, where does that come from? Is that just something you've always had?
Yeah. It comes from, as I say, that steadfast belief, that determination, that resilience, telling myself time and time again before I was successful that I was deputy vice president because I didn't get the memo. I did not get the memo that told me I couldn't. People often ask me, how did you do it? First of all, I didn't know that I couldn't. I didn't get the memo that told me I couldn't. So for me, it was that determination to make a difference, to be the difference that I wanted to see, and somebody has to start somewhere. And so, in the Law Society's almost 200-year history, it should not have taken to 2021 to get a president of colour. 177 presidents later, almost 200 years later, to have a person of colour become president of our law society. The solicitor profession is diverse, and
Hmm.
we must be representative of the society we serve. And that comes with our office holders as well.
So you are so many months now before you give up that presidency. A couple of months, I think, a couple of months and a few days. Um, what have been your greatest learnings during this time?
Well, my greatest learnings has been that the greatest plans do not always work out. So I had planned originally to come to begin my term as president in October 2021, but as it was, I became president earlier in March 2021. I had to step up earlier. Um, I did not expect to take the reins at the tail end of Brexit through a pandemic, um, through a war, through Afghanistan, and so forth. I did not expect all of that. So, my greatest learning curve has been that communication is absolutely the key. I'm very open, I'm very transparent. I work on that basis because I believe that you have to take people with you. And when people can see their role, their part in the journey, then they are more readily willing to come with you. So I've learned absolutely lots in this role, and absolutely honed my skills and been exposed to so much. It's been a remarkable platform, but learned so many things. But above all, how to listen. I've really sharpened those listening skills.
Absolutely. And is there anything during that this term, Stephanie, that you would want to go back and change, or is there anything that you would like to have done differently?
I probably would not have wanted to serve during a pandemic. 15 months at home behind a computer screen was towards the end quite soul destroying. I absolutely worried about those colleagues and aspiring colleagues who were at home, who didn't have who didn't have the home life, the space, the resources to be connected, who didn't have those networks. And so I was absolutely grateful to be able to open up our building again, and just have that as a place, a sanctuary that people could come. And I'm a people's person. I love being connected to people and to be able to meet people and speak to people rather than behind a computer screen.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think uh, pandemic has taught us all so much actually about us as human beings and how actually we're naturally social creatures. Even the introverts are naturally social creatures and still need to have just that little bit of human connection. And not that it's over yet, right? But I'm always curious to be looking forward, always curious to think, what's next. We do that with our candidates all of the time. What's the next chapter look like? What is it that you're wanting in your career? So I suppose my question is, what's next for you, Stephanie, as you come to the end of your presidency?
So as I approach the end of my presidency and also reflect, pause, and take some time to refresh, I look back, and it's been a remarkable platform to serve as president. It has been my honour, it has been my privilege to serve. A remarkable platform for achieving change. And people often ask me about my legacy. What will be my legacy? I think my legacy will be to leave the door open, I came to this wanting to make the profession or to leave the profession more diverse and inclusive than the one I entered. But have been very clear that it must be a shared ambition with each and of us, each and every one of us playing our part. So, what next for me? Having steered the Law Society, the profession of more than 200,000 solicitors, and through a number of world crises, and to be the steady hand, or on the tiller, to ensure that we remain that stable body. I would like to write a book to capture my thoughts around my experience as a president, as a leader, how I got here, my story. I would like to continue to advocate for social justice, to take my skills, my experience to some non-executive director roles. I've worked, as you said at the start, in a number of charitable organisations, not-for-profits, but to take that to more corporate bodies, and how perhaps my skills can be utilised there. But above all, as I say, my passion remains in ensuring that there is access to justice. There is a lack of awareness around our justice system in this country, around public legal education. And I would like to continue to use this platform, to build on this platform, to make a difference. Yeah.
Well, I look forward to buying a copy of the book when it's available. I'm sure it's going to be a fascinating read. And you mentioned there about social justice, and I know that you have the opportunity as the president of the Law Society to have a dinner. And I understand that there are certain charities that you are wishing to support. Would you just like to share with our listenership and I was about to say readership, viewership, what those charities are, Stephanie?
So throughout my time as president, I have supported many charities, but primarily three charities: Law Care, which supports mental health and well-being in the profession; the Sutton Trusts, which supports social mobility; and Access to Justice Foundation, which is exactly what it says. Through those three charities, to really highlight and showcase the work that they are doing. And as I say, to support my presidential plan around social mobility, mental health and well-being, and access to justice, but to really highlight and showcase the work that those three charities are doing. They do remarkable work. And it has been a privilege to work with those three charities. And I'm sure that our collaboration won't end on the 12th of October when I leave office.
I'm sure it won't. And I think what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to put links at the bottom of this podcast for those that would like to find out more about it, or indeed, if they wish to donate. All funds are always welcome to all charities. So is there anything, just as you're talking about, on the 13th of October, 12th of October, 13th of October, taking some time off, you're going to be writing your book, looking at how you can take your experience that you've learnt as president of the Law Society, and indeed throughout your life, to some corporates to help them with some of the challenges that they may have in terms of that social mobility and justice and all of the things about which you've spoken. But was there anything that you think during your Law Society presidential term that you either weren't allowed to do, weren't permitted? I'm struggling to find the word really, but is there something that you couldn't do that you're going to be allowed to do on the 13th of October?
Well, obviously, being president, being an office holder, you have to speak with the Law Society's voice. So it will. So to be able to speak in my own voice, and to be able to speak on different things, will be something that I will absolutely welcome. I'm not going to go too crazy. I'm not going to go too much off piece from what the things that I've spoken about as president. But just the ability actually to be able to dive into some conversations that I wouldn't have otherwise been able to delve into.
Oh, well, again, alongside the book, and I look forward to hearing some of those thoughts and ideas. Stephanie, it's been an absolute joy to speak with you today. Is there one thing in life that you can't live without?
Well, gosh, I think at the moment it's got to be the internet, hasn't it?
well, maybe when you're writing that book, you can switch it off and have some downtime. But I do agree. I think it does allow us to be connected, and I think during the pandemic, in particular, even though it did have some downside, it was definitely a good way of being able to keep connected with family, friends, and loved ones. Thank you so much for your time, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Hugely appreciated from me and from our leadership viewership in summing up. It's been a joy to speak with you.
Thank you.